The company that makes the BlackBerry mobile device is searching for a way to turn its flagging stock around. I'm Louise Story reporting for Business Day Live. We'll take a look at India's economy with Times writer Vikas Bajaj and examine the circular way European institutions are lending money to Greece. But first, we're joined by technology reporter Brian Chen to talk about Research in Motion, the maker of the BlackBerry. Hi, Brian.
Hey, how's it going?
Okay, so just a few years ago in 2008, the stock of Research in Motion was trading at $140. What happened?
So basically, the iPhone came out, and ever since that happened, we've seen it plummet. And
where is it trading now? It fell a lot yesterday.
It fell a significant amount yesterday.
It's around $10.
Yeah,
I mean, that is a gigantic drop, $140 to down to around $10.
Right.
And it's all because of the iPhone?
Yeah, and to give you an idea in terms of market share, it used to be something about 55%. 4 years ago, and now it's about 5% in the United States.
55% in the U.S. for the BlackBerry.
That's how much it's shrunk, yeah.
And now it's 5%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yesterday the company came out and they said they're reviewing their strategic options. And, you know, in Wall Street speak, that's kind of code word for we might sell ourselves. So what are the odds that RIM sells the company, and who might they sell to?
Well, right now they're retaining RBC Capital and JP Morgan to review their strategy, and they haven't discussed selling yet, but they're considering licensing their BlackBerry software to other companies and also partnering with other companies.
So they might license it to who? Apple or Google, or who would want the BlackBerry software on their phones?
That's a good question.
Right, because you know Apple and Google are very proud of their own software.
They're doing a pretty good job. I would imagine they would need somebody like I don't know, maybe somebody like Nokia who could use their security or something like that. Some company that's not doing so well.
You're hitting on an important point, which is that the main advantage BlackBerry has is that their software has the, you know, what a lot of people say is the best security compared to the iPhone, or, you know, how important is security on mobile devices to people?
Research in Motion continues to stress that they have the best security. But yeah, for people, I think really top-notch executives, I think like, let's say President Obama would probably want a BlackBerry, and government officials. Yeah, so that's kind of the vertical where RIM continues to exist. But the question is how many people like that are going to keep the company alive by buying a BlackBerry? There's not very many people who need that type of security.
Now, I did read that even though their market share in the U.S. is shrinking, their overall sales are still going up a little. You know, how is that happening?
In the U.S., they're shrinking a lot, but globally, especially in developing countries, the sales are still growing. But
so places like India? And
yeah, right, in emerging markets, so to speak.
Okay, and so what are we waiting for? I know there's a new phone coming out, the BlackBerry 10.
The BlackBerry 10 is supposed to be a lot like the iPhone. It's going to be a touchscreen interface to start with. They're going to have keyboard phones later, but the phones come out in sometime in
this October.
Right.
And will there be applications, you know, things you can download on the BlackBerry?
Yeah, there are going to be applications just like on the iPhone, and they have a special keyboard and a special camera application. The question is that going to turn them around? Right now they're expected to post a loss.
In the second quarter.
In the second quarter, whereas in the past they've always posted a profit even though they've been shrinking. So this is a pretty significant announcement.
So, you know, people used to joke that the BlackBerry was the crackberry, that, you know, you really needed it, but it sounds like that's no longer the case for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be, I think the analysts right now agree that it's going to take a miracle for them to turn things around.
Well, it'll be an interesting story to watch. Thanks so much for joining us, Brian.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Emerging economies like India have been giving the global economy steam in recent years, but they're now slowing. We're joined from Mumbai with Vikas Bajaj. Hi, Vikas.
Hi, Louise.
So you have a story in the paper today talking about how the Indian economy is still growing, but it's growing slower. And what was so interesting in your story is you talk about the kind of power couple that rules India. Tell us about this governance situation there.
Yeah, so the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh is a renowned economist. He was the finance minister in 1991 when India started opening up. His boss, essentially, is a woman named Sonia Gandhi. She's the widow of Rajiv Gandhi, the prime minister who was killed in 1991. And so she runs the Congress Party, which governs the country, and he runs the government. And for 5 years, this arrangement worked quite well. The economy was growing well, and the Congress Party was gaining power across the country. But for the last couple of years, it's sort of kind of fallen apart in a way, because Ms. Gandhi has a very sort of populist instincts, and Mr. Singh is sort of seen as a caretaker prime minister who's just there until Sonia's son, Rahul, is ready to take over.
And so you wrote about how, he's really opened the country up to a lot of investment, and he, is more of an economist, but he has to go to the president to get permission for a lot of things that he wants to do, and that sometimes that makes it difficult for things to get done there.
Indeed. Analysts say that's essentially the core of the problem at the moment, that there might be things that Manmohan Singh wants to get done on the economic front, but they're politically not palatable to Ms. Gandhi. For instance, they recently raised the price of petroleum, which they had subsidized. But the bigger subsidy is on diesel, and Ms. Gandhi probably doesn't want to raise the prices of diesel because there's a lot of people who would be very upset, and there's a big election coming up in 2 years.
So tell us about this interesting thing happened around the turn of the year. India was going to let stores like Walmart in, and they announced it, and then they took it back. So what was that about?
Can you repeat the question, Louisa?
When they were going to they were going to let Walmart in and other stores like that into India, and they announced that these American companies and foreign companies could come in, and then they rescinded it. And that seemed to be an example of what you're writing about their kind of decision-making governance problem. Tell us what went down with that.
Yeah, that decision in particular was sort of embodied the dysfunction in this government at the moment. They announced that they would allow foreign retailers like Walmart to come in, and then just 2 weeks later, she said that they had to put it on hold because one of their coalition partners said basically she would let the government fail. And that would have meant early elections, more than 2.5 years ahead of time. And so the government sort of blinked and said, we'll put this on hold indefinitely. And it really cost them a lot of credibility in the global markets. And investors said that, well, they can't even push this through. It's a relatively minor change in the grand scheme of things. Then what can they really do?
These seem very much like the growing pains that you would see in any emerging country as it comes onto the market. This struggle between kind of the social policies and how much you want to open the doors to business. There were some interesting remarks about taxes in India recently, and how some of the leaders there are concerned about becoming a tax haven. What was that about?
Yeah, this goes back to a deal that Vodafone did and bought an Indian cellular company. The transaction was structured in such a way that there were no taxes paid in India. And the Indian government and the Indian officials have been very chagrined and upset about this because they feel that when you transact an asset in India, the capital gains on that asset should be taxed in India. But Vodafone claims that this was basically what changed hands was some offshore shares that then through several layers resulted in change of control of the Indian company. So they believe it's not taxable. They in fact this went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court of India decided that this was not taxable, but the Indian government remains adamant that this should be taxed, and so they've gone ahead and passed a change in the law that says that all of these transactions going back to 1962 should be taxed in India.
So this is really upsetting a lot of international companies. Just one more thing, you wrote about how the growth is slowing. They're expecting maybe 6 to 7% growth this year. That's down from the 9% growth they've had. But I got to tell you, because there are a lot of countries around the globe that would like 6 to 7% growth. So, perhaps you're being too skeptical, too negative?
Indeed. That was what one minister was telling us today. 6 to 7% growth is, by global standards, amazing. But in India, it's seen as sort of a failure because we were at 9% and there was talk of going to 10%. There's a sense that this was India's moment, that India could surpass China in terms of at least its growth rate. And India really needs to grow fast because it has a large young population. More than half the population is either 25 or younger. And India needs to create a lot of opportunities for these people. It needs to create a lot of jobs, needs to create infrastructure, needs to invest in education. And that's just a bit harder to do at 6% rather than 9 to 10%.
Well, I guess it's all relative. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Louise.
You've been hearing about the European bailouts of Greece. Well, it turns out when monetary institutions release money to Greece as part of the bailout, much of that money comes right back to those European institutions in the form of interest payments. David Gillen recently spoke with reporter Jack Ewing about this circular strategy to shore up the Greek economy.
About 3/4 of the Greek debt is now owned by the European Central Bank, the European Union, or the International Monetary Fund. Most of the money that they are giving to Greece in the form of aid is actually being used to service the debt. In other words, what Greece owes back to the IMF and the European Union and the ECB.
How is this at all helping, the ordinary Greek citizens then?
Most of this money is not going to the Greek government to provide basic services to the citizens. The Greek government has been cutting services like crazy. The only way you can say it's helping the Greek people is it's keeping the country from going bankrupt and defaulting on its debt and having to leave the euro with much worse consequences.
So Jack, Greece has a second bailout. Remind me again how big that is?
It's about $160 billion.
Okay, now this one is being funded almost entirely by European taxpayers. I'm guessing that what's going on here in part is that officials in Europe want to make sure that they get paid back, right?
That's exactly it. Paying the total debt, that's something that will be dealt with in years to come. Right now, they just don't want Greece to default.
Right. Now, obviously, the financial markets around the world continue to watch Greece. What's the next big development there that we've got to worry about?
Well, the big thing everybody is worrying about is the elections on June 17th to see if they can, somebody gets enough votes that they can form a government. Right now, they don't have a functioning permanent government.
Now, a lot of people seem to be coming to the conclusion that Greece is quite possibly going to leave the euro. Is there any new news with this at this point?
I think that the European authorities, as well as the Greek people, when people start to think about what it would actually mean for Greece to leave the euro, it's pretty scary. And I think that they will do what they need to do to keep Greece in the euro. But the one big risk is that events spin out of control, and that could happen.
That's all for today. Please stay with us online at nytimes.com for our continuing coverage. I'm Louise Story, reporting for Business Day Live. Thanks for watching.